Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and the purpose of this video is to show you sort of three ways to make API requests or HTTP requests. Now, why would you want to make these requests? If you're a web developer, you may decide to use a third-party API to build your website, which means you're pulling information from this third-party website. Think of an API as an application that doesn't provide you HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's not meant to serve you information that gets rendered in the browser. What an API does is it's going to send back data, particularly in a special format called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. And the idea is you can pull this data into your website through your JavaScript and then do whatever you want with it. Render it to the screen, use it to build out your website. So you might be using a third-party API, or you may end up building your own API and you want to test it out. But the idea, again, API, think of it as a web application that sends information, doesn't send over a website. So you can't just go in the browser and try it out. You could do some, like for example, let's go to jasonplaceholder.com. This is a website that has dummy APIs for you to try out, so you can get used to working with APIs. Whenever you have an API, you have an endpoint. This is essentially the website or the URL at which, once that URL gets a request, it gets a response and sends back the information. So for example, this URL right here, I would hit Control-C, open in a new browser, and notice it doesn't open up a new website. Instead, it sends me this JSON object back. And notice it looks fairly aesthetic, like I can read this. It's because I have an extension for reading JSON. So in your browser, whether it's Firefox or Chrome, it's not a bad idea to install a extension for reading JSON, so you can see this nice in the browser. And then, because it would look like this otherwise. Okay. So yeah, I could theoretically test it in the browser. The problem is that when it comes to API HTTP requests, when you're sending requests to a server, there are different verbs that you can express: get, post, put, patch, delete. And when you're using a browser, the browser really only sets a get request. So when I put this URL in here, it automatically sends a get request. So in that case, the only kind of endpoints I can test out in the browser are endpoints making get requests. So for me to be able to test post requests, put requests, delete requests, I need to do them in some other way. So there's a few different ways. There's one that's probably built into your terminal called cURL. Okay, if you're not sure you have cURL, just type cURL in your browser and type in version, and see I have version 7.680. Now let's take a look at how we would do a cURL request. Okay. Okay. Now again, just like a browser, it'll assume a GET request unless I specify otherwise. So I could literally just do curl and then type in the URL. Okay, and see I get back that object. So see that same thing I got back in the browser, I get back. So think of curl as like a little mini browser you have in your terminal. Okay, and if you don't have curl, then you just install it. And I'm using a bash terminal, so if you're on Windows, download git bash. Okay. Now you can see here it's all done through text-based whatnot. Now if I want to do a different type of request, like a post request, so I'm just looking for the exact syntax. So I think the -v flag is for the verb. The header tag is if you're going to include headers. So here's like what a header looks like. And this is any data you're sending over as part of the body. Okay? If you're making a post request. Cool. I'm just looking for one other little example here. Okay. So let's take a look at JSON here. The JSON placeholder website, because there's other URLs if you want to make. So these are GET requests because they're meant to like get data, but sometimes you want to send data. So they have this URL here, so that way you can test making a post request. So I'm going to copy that URL. I'm going to clear out my terminal. And I am going to say curl, I think it's -v post. And what I want to do is I need a header. And the header is going to be content type. And what the header does, it just tells the server that's receiving the request other information. And generally when you're creating information, sending information, I need to tell it what type of information I'm sending. So what I'm sending over is application JSON, or JSON data. But it looks for application JSON as the value. Application JSON, okay, and then we want the data. And the data is looking for an object, a JavaScript object that has title, okay, so JavaScript object notations like this. Title, we'll just use the exam. I'll just type it out. Foo. Then the next one is, and then each key has to get quotation marks, body, bar, and user ID 1. Okay, so that's that. Okay, and let me think here. Anything else I want to include? Headers. I got that. Yeah, that should be good. See if it works. Closing connection, could not resolve host. Post. Oh, I didn't put the URL. That's H the host, and put the URL. There we go. Boo, boo, boo. Let's do curl -v post. Cannot type application, cannot resolve host. Well, host. Okay, so let's see here. So if I do this, that. Let me just modify the previous one. Do. Okay, let's see what it said. Okay, so this one we got a different response. We are completely uploaded and fine. It looks like it did the thing. Connected to the JSON placeholder. Successful set certificate. Good, good, good. And subject is still certificate post. Okay, so you're getting this response. And not exactly the response I think I was expecting. You can see it's supposed to output this object. So let me see if I can find a good curl example with post. Curl post request example. Do. Type in post request curl D. So I guess you don't have to write the word post. There we go. X is for the type. But I think this was fine. But I don't think I need that -v. I think that's. Let's see what happens if I do that. Cannot resolve host application. Something weird about my request. But the point is that you can use curl to make these requests. So you can always just Google what the syntax is. But there is easier ways to do it. This is why everyone likes to use Postman. Because if I use Postman, Postman, Okay, you'll see this is a much easier process. But the reason I want to show you cURL first, so that way you understand like why Postman exists, because it was an alternative to cURL, because cURL's kind of stressful. So in here, let me just close out all these extra tabs. I would create a new tab. I would put the URL here. So there's the URL. I would say I want to make a post request. And the header should already have application JSON. It'll automatically do that. So all I have to do is say, hey, I want to send some JSON. So I'm going to choose raw JSON. And then I just type in the JSON here. So let me actually compare this to... I gotta take a look over here, back to the JSON placeholder. So it's ID, title, body. So ID, oh no, here it is. Foo, title, body, user ID. So title, here is my title. Body, this is some body, text. And user ID, this is, this needs quotations. And user ID is a number, so it should just be 1. And see, all I have to do is hit send now. So I just hit send, and ta-da, see, it works. It sends back my response, confirming that I got the request. Okay? So this makes that really easy. I can choose my different verbs and whatnot. So again, when it comes to testing an API, Postman makes life a lot easier. But you may be doing your editing already in VS Code and you don't want to open up a separate application. So there's also an extension called REST Client, which allows you to create files with an extension of .http. And you can use these to make test requests. So for example, let's go back to JSON placeholder. Let's first do the GET request. So let's copy this one. So GET's pretty easy. You just literally just plop the URL in there, and see right here it says send request. Just send request, and see here we see the response. And there is the data that we would get in the browser. So nice. Now if I want to do a post, let's take a look at the syntax. So here you go. So you start with the verb, the URL, okay, and then you would put the headers right below, and then we can put the data right there. So let's try that out. So let me get the place, the put, I want the post request one. Here we go, post request. Control C. So what I'm going to do is do a post to this URL. And then again, content type, application JSON. And then what we're setting is title, a title. Well, actually, I can just copy it from Postman. Doot. Okay. Okay, so then when I go over here and click send request, it must be valid token. Oh, I see. They want me to do it like this. Okay, so then I do this, and there we go. We get the response. Oh, well, that's not a, let's see here. Let's expand that. Oh, it only gave me back an ID. So let me think about that. Did not get the... They did not get the JSON data. I think this should still be uppercase. Content type. So let's try that again. Header name must be a valid HTTP token. Where's she here? So I'll just follow that. So let's add the HTTP /1.1 here. See if that makes a difference. No, I mean, it's making the request successfully, but see, it's not adding these three properties. So my concern is that it's not getting this body is not arriving. So let's see here. Let's see if I take away that space. Well, let's go back and take a look at the examples. And that looks pretty much the way I did it. Post URL content type. So I'll change this back to lowercase. Still only the ID. XML. Interesting. Let's see. I'm just trying to see if there's anything I'm not seeing here. I mean, that looks pretty good to me. I'm just not seeing what I expect in the response. Okay, saying it must be a proper HTTP token, which is what I did first time. Like that. I didn't seem to like it. Content type application JSON. Last I checked, that's what we see here in the example. Let's see if I see any difference here that I'm not thinking. Unless this is all supposed to be on the same line. And it's just a space. That doesn't look right either. Yeah, well, it doesn't quite get the right colors. So it looks like it should definitely be on multiple lines. Well, it's something to play with, but the idea is that's another way you can make requests. So the idea is you learn three ways: cURL, Postman, and using REST client in VS Code. They're all legit ways to be making requests to test your APIs. Again, testing APIs can always oftentimes be tricky because you're making sure you want to send the right headers and the right syntax and the right body and the right information, whether it's XML, form, URL data, JSON, as we used in today's example, because that's the most common one. It can be tricky, but it's worthwhile to get used to this because it allows you to test your third-party APIs. It allows you to test the APIs that you build, so that way you can better use them in your web applications. My name's Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.